Well, hello and welcome to my YouTube channel. Going out on another plein air adventure. We're kind of third week into November here, and we're having some pretty nice weather. The temperature is going to be about 3 or 4 degrees today. Calgary, Alberta can get a lot colder than that, but we're pretty fortunate this year. So I'm gonna block that sun for you here. So I'm just gonna head over, find maybe something along the riverbank today to paint. If I can find a little structure in there, that would be nice. If not, I'm just happy to be out here painting today. So yeah, thank you for joining me, and enjoy the video. Well, it doesn't get any prettier than this for late fall. Beautiful day here. This is the scene that I was hoping I could capture today if the light was right, and looks like a beautiful spot. So I think I found what I want to paint today. It's a lovely scene. I'll be zooming in a little bit from there. I really like the brightness of the grasses that I can see directly in the middle there. I also like some of these snow elements here, and the water that's moving around the ice. I think I may actually step back a bit. So I'm pretty much set up here. I'm just gonna start the drawing, just a very simple drawing for this. I don't like to really over render, so we're just going for large shapes here mainly. I won't have time for a lot of detail, so we're gonna keep it pretty simple. I like to be done these in about an hour and a half max. And yeah, so just a simple drawing. I'm just getting a little bit of my Gamsol out here. I forgot to put some in my container. I'm using a little bit of the Gamlin tube solvent-free gel if I need to get a little bit of more workability with the paint, which can happen when it's cold out here. But yeah, the scene that I'm going to be painting is pretty much right to the left of the canvas. I like to do that for my own reference too. That way I can sort of do a site comparison with it there. But anyways, I'm going to just draw this in quickly. I really like those that little bit of water and the darkness of it that comes in to the picture. So I'm going to use a little bit of ultramarine blue here and just a little bit of raw umber. So I put that in. My horizon line is kind of sitting just a little high of center, which is nice. Got some trees off to the distance there. So we'll start with that as the horizon line. Actually, you can see just from how it compares to the scene behind that'll work quite nicely there. It's a great way to capture the scene if you have problems transferring the painting to the canvas, is to go site kind of and place it right next to your canvas and put your composition in there first with that. I'm liking some of those warm tones at the back there are really nice. I do want that piece of bank in here. these grasses are just beautiful at the front here. That's what actually drew me to this scene, was all this warmth at the front here. I really like that against the cool of the ice that's formed on the water. A little bit darker in behind. I'm actually seeing some sort of reddy notes there that I'm gonna put in. Oops, that's a bit red. Just gotta grab a cloth here and wipe that away a bit. Yeah, I'm seeing some real fairly strong reds as that gets hit by the light, that larger area of brush at the back, and then it gets a little cooler and darker here as it comes over. That's pretty much the scene that I want to capture today. I do want to catch the way that water goes around that edge there. I'll leave that down a little. That bank there is not quite so warm as it's in the shade. Using a little ultraviolet there to just cool that down. And there's a few nice tall trees in there that I want to capture. That just look quite startling against the blue there. These two in particular are quite nice. And there's a few just in this bank here that we're going to put in. Just kind of doing a rough placement here because I do have to go in and do some sky. But just to kind of give me a little bit of an idea where they're in. Now it's sort of looks all scrubby from all that. The other trees that are back in a distance there, so I'll just place that idea of that in so I know roughly how high I'm going to go before I put that sky. I don't feel like I need to see a lot of sky in there, but I do want to show some of that. It's nice and pretty and blue today. Oops, that was a little bit red. So just kind of a scrubby kind of a look in behind there. Lots of little color notes in there that I'm seeing. It's just nice and warm. The sun is cutting over from the left here, so just really warm in behind those trees. Where I've placed those there, but and just again a little bit more over here. doing that just so that I know where that tree line is going to come down to in there. And let's warm up those grasses at the front there. Still kind of doing mainly the drawing, kind of working it in there, and just want to make sure my battery is working here. Sometimes it doesn't connect properly. Okay, I was just checking that battery, make sure it was hooked up. Try not to sniffle today, but I do tend to get a little sniffly when I'm out here. Now let's get a little bit of that coolness of that ice down here. Using ultramarine violet there, I'm going to put just a tad bit of the yellow ochre into it just to calm it down a bit there. There's a little bit of a tree line or a snow line there also that we want to make sure we get. This gets a little darker also as it goes into the left of the picture there. In the shade. Goes around the corner there. We'll be coming back and putting some highlights into that later. Gonna get a little bit of kind of a warm color here that I want to, that's a lot of it. Gonna put some in that snow that I'm seeing. This area here, we'll start with it fairly warm here just so that I can see where that placement is gonna be here. The sun is really bright on there. That's gonna be way too bright, but again, that ultramarine blue, a little bit of burnt sienna and yellow ochre in it. And darken that back area a bit more. Kind of working on values and simple drawings at this point. Sure that those don't get lost on me, the placement of those. Just going a little bit darker, ultramarine blue, a little bit of burnt raw umber there. Just so I don't get confused about where those are in the picture. some beautiful tones in this snow as it comes across there. A little bit more blue in those shadows lines. And go a little bit darker in here where that water is. Ultramarine in there, a little bit of burnt umber. That comes around just to the back of that little island there. A little more blue in it as it comes to the front of it there. And some titanium. There's a shadow that kind of a dark puddly look to that one side there. Just again focusing on darks right now and getting values in there. I liked the bit of a zigzag that was in this composition when I looked at it. I tend to like zigzag compositions. They really pull you into the picture. That snow at the front is actually fairly warm here. And of course we'll be coming back and putting some highlights into that color too. But right now I just want to see that warmth in there so that I make sure that pulls through later in that snow. Probably I've made it a little warmer than a few shadow lines running across there also. Standing back here and there just to make sure that I'm happy with my composition. It gives me a chance to really look at the values a little bit more. It's a little bit darker in this area right here. When you're out here doing these plein airs, you mainly want to get down the values and color notes and that. And you can always add a little bit more detail to the picture when you get it back to the studio. I try not to change them too much though, because I really like the spontaneity that that you get from plein air. So it kind of defeats the purpose if you make too many changes in the studio. I don't do these to sell them, so I'm kind of more interested in just learning how to see color correctly outside versus a camera, because a camera tends to really darken shadows and change the way the contrast in it. And there's just so many more colors in the scene in life, and I just love that. I love pulling those out. And again, we'll be coming in with some brighter highlights where those ice is more visible. Right now, just wanna such a beautiful day in Calgary. You're so fortunate if you get that delayed onslaught of winter. Can make for a much more shorter winter if it comes a little bit later. Adding some warmth into this area here. So that sun cuts across there, it's quite warm. And then this one bank here is quite warm also. And then that little bit of shrubbery up the back there is quite warm. The sun is coming right across there and hitting that. Actually quite a bit higher in there. And quite a bit of warmth in there behind. Gonna put some of that in the back there too. There's definitely a sort of readiness to some of those branches as the trees get hit by the sun. Now, one area of the canvas that I haven't done anything to yet, I just want to, before I do that though, I just want to catch a shadow that's running across there. Really cool shadow. I'm using ultramarine violet and A little bit of burnt umber in there just to cool it down a little more. Now, I'm going to get a clean brush. I want to get that sky in. It's the last part of the canvas that we haven't done anything with, so I'm going to use a little cerulean. A little bit of ultramarine, maybe, just a touch. But cerulean's got that little bit of green in there, and that's really what I'm seeing in that area behind. It's actually quite pale in there. Pale greeny color. I can come in and put some sky holes into this later, so I'm not too worried about it being brought down into that tree line. And I don't want to get my color muddy because it's quite a clear sky there. A bit more white in there, a little lighter down at the lower areas there. It actually goes a little more ultramarine as it goes up a little higher, but we don't have a lot of sky in there, so most of that's going to be kind of that greeny color. A little bit of cloud in that area there, but you're not going to see a lot of that by the time we're done with those tree branches and things. So don't want to over focus there. Like I say, I can come in and do some tree holes later if I want to. Okay, I'm definitely seeing. I'm gonna just clean that brush off. Good wipe. I wanna definitely warm up that snow as it's coming in here. There's a little hint of that on the other side there. In fact, that snow line in there is quite warm. I want to get that dark edge that this is kind of the stage where you start to doubt your painting a little bit because it's really very basic. And you just got to kind of just keep plugging along and seeing more lights and more darks and putting them in as you go. And just trusting that the whole thing will come out. Sometimes they don't though, and that's okay. It's still a wonderful day out here to paint and putting some dark along that far bank there and pulling it up a little bit where the shadow is And behind those grasses. Actually, get a little bit more burnt sienna in there with the ultramarine here, and there's a bit of that even at the tops of that hill there, just where that little bit of shadow here and there hits. So ultramarine, a little bit of burnt sienna. One of the reasons you don't really want to be out here much more than an hour and a half is that these colors change as the light changes. And you kind of lose what you started, and it just... Seeing some nice dark kind of shadows on that edge. In front of the grass. A little more ultramarine in that same mixture here. Again, I want to make sure that this shadow in here is dark enough. And it actually gets very, very dark there as it goes into water. So I'm going to make sure that I place that in there a little bit more. So very handy having the scene right directly next to what I'm painting here, because I can really use that as a reference for the drawing if I want. Not that you really want to be a slave to the drawing anyways, but if you do like to be more representational, it's a great way to do that. Putting some mottled tones in here because there's pieces of ice that are a little bit more melted than others, and so it gives it a little bit more variety in there. Catching a few more of these shadows as they come across there. Now, I'm going to put a warmer color out here. I've got some sort of golds and sort of brighter warm tones that I have from mixing up when I first initially started, and I'm going to put some of those into that bank there. I think this is the coldest I've been out yet. It is warming as the day goes along a bit more, but I think 4 degrees was the coolest I had painted in before today. I just kind of started doing these winter ones. I've never actually painted outside in the winter before, but I was really intrigued by a few videos that I've seen of hardier souls that have done some painting in the wintertime too, and thought, well, let's see how it goes. I don't know how I'll feel when January comes, but I just want to get that white off my brush. It's dulling down that nice warm tone too much, so. I really love the reds that I'm seeing in those bushes along the top there, so I really want to get that in. There's a little bit of a light where that sun is hitting the tops of those, a little bit warmer though, tops of those grasses on the far side there, and it kind of comes all the way along the back there. It's actually a little warmer than that. I'm gonna go just a bit warmer. I'm going to scrub in a few more of these bits around the trees there. Not doing anything real specific in here, just more about general color and say we can put some sky holes in there if I want to break that up a little bit more. And there is some dark tree branches also that are going to break that up, so nice and warm. There's some cad yellow deep. There's a little bit of cad red light, a little bit of burnt sienna in there, a little bit of, even a little bit of yellow ochre, and I'm just hinting at some of those masses on the tops of those that from a distance you don't see any kind of detail at all. So you want to really keep this just really loose and light, and making this tree line really soft too, because it's going into the background. Just want to keep that edge really soft where it meets the sky. Let's go a little bit. I like to move around a little bit, so I'm gonna now go into that bit of ice formation that we have, or the snow that we have closer to the front here, and I want to add some more darks because I'm really seeing a little bit darker edge on that. Burnt sienna, ultramarine here. There's some patches of darker area too where the ice is just a little bit more transparent. ultramarine, burnt sienna, a little bit of warmer tones that I had already on the palette there. I'm seeing some shadows as that. Now I want to kind of go in behind that water line and put in some of those bits of ice that are kind of a gray violet color in there, or gray down blue. And constantly stepping back and having a look at the view from a distance. Now, some of those grasses get very warm near the base of them, so I'm using cad red light and yellow ochre, tiny bit of burnt sienna there, and I just kind of want to get some of those. They're very tossed around and bent now because it's a little bit later in the fall, so they've had some weight on them from a previous snow, so they're definitely not looking straight up and down. So I'm just using a very random sort of approach here in putting those darks in there. And then once we have those darks in there, we can add that brightness that's sitting at the tops of them. Don't want to lose my little darks that are kind of right in the lower edge there either, because that really seats it down, right? And I again want to go back into that back area and make sure that is dark enough at the back. Especially where some of those shadows are coming up that are kind of hidden from the sun there. So a bit of modeling on this little island there. I don't want it to have just a flat look to it, so a little ultramarine and white and some dirty color that I have on my palette. And I'll kind of put that into that piece of snowy area. Now I've got a bigger brush here that I used for the snowy areas, so I'm gonna get that again, mix it into a warm, just with some colors on my palette that are warm, that are sitting there, and we'll kind of get that into that forward edge there where that's nice and bright and warm. And there's a nice bit of that warmth that goes across the piece of snow also. Here. I'm using this paint fairly heavy now because it gives it more of a textured look, and there's a fair bit of texture in that area. What's happening there there so far. I just want to enhance some more of that warmth that is in this area here. In fact, I think I'm going to grab my palette knife for this, just because I want that to be fairly thick. And there's a little bit of warmth in with that titanium again, so let's pull that across there. Put a little bit of cad yellow deep in there just to really warm that up. Yeah, that really brightened that up a lot. And we're going to use that palette knife also on these edges on the other side there, because that snow line there is quite warm also. And down at the front here, let's really warm that up too. One of the things that attracted me to this scene was the contrast of those warm and dark colors. So I really want to make sure that they're in there. Okay, now I am going to try and define a little bit more of those grasses as they, with a little bit of a brighter tone. They are just beautiful the way they're getting hit with that light, so I want to make sure I get those in before I lose that. Keep that loose. I don't want that to get too contrived in there. A little bit of burnt sienna mixing in there with that. It seems a little too bright. Hoping that sun's going to come out again. That's it coming now. And they're not quite as bright in this area here because the sun is so low that it's not really hitting those as much anymore. Still a hint of brightness back there, but it's not as light as the ones at the front. But there is still a nice little bit of an orangey tone in there. kind of darken some of that. Area on the bank. There's some shadows in there that are still. There's some warmer patches in there in that snow also. As much as there's some darker ones, there's some warmer areas that are being hit by the sun. One thing I love about snow and ice is that there's just so many different colors in it. It's definitely not white snow and ice. It's got lots of different tones depending on how the light hits it, and can really make for quite an interesting picture. Starting to come alive a little bit more. There's a little bit of warmth even just through this area here. Oh, that sun has come out now and it's just gorgeous. Along the shoreline edge here too. Just where it hits it as it goes through all the texture of the ice. Okay, I just had to reset that a little bit. Ultramarine now, a little bit of burnt sienna again. A little bit of my ultramarine violet also. A tad bit of white. I just want to catch some of these darker puddles on this far side there. And it actually gets fairly dark as it goes around that corner. Corner up a bit. There's a little bit of snow in this little corner over here. And it's definitely on the bluer side. I've actually added just a hint of cerulean to that tone. Just seeing a kind of a really nice pretty color of in some of these edges here, along with the warmer ones. I always remind myself that you need dark to see light, so if it starts to look a little wishy-washy, it's time to put some dark in there. So kind of going back and forth with some of the deeper tones that are in that ice, and then some of the warmer ones. So I think it's time to maybe put a few of those branches in. I'll probably come back and work on this foreground in a little bit here, but I want to get those trees in before that light changes too much here, because it's definitely going south here. Well, I'm going to use burnt sienna, ultramarine, and the shade is definitely on the right hand side here. I'm keeping these very, very fine. These lines, it's quite a distance away, so they don't have to be heavy. I'm gonna make up a little bigger puddle there so I don't run out. I like that color. It's as much as I've made it dark, I've still kept it pretty warm because that sun is just beautiful over there. Not going to be a slave to every branch or that I'm seeing, but there's some very interesting shapes over there. So it's more about just building the feeling that I see when I look over there. And now it's just sort of lots of movement and sort of a busyness in there. I don't want to take away from that. Background though, and that impression that I got with just scrubbing in some of that color. This one here is, it's almost what I liked about that was it was almost creating this little bit of an archway in the background there that was quite pretty against that pale sky. Keeping them. They don't even, these lines don't even necessarily have to connect, as just because the branches can look a little transparent sometimes as the light passes through them. So I will actually come back and soften these lines after I get them in a bit. I don't want them to look too harsh and stand out too much in that background. I'm gonna actually wet that down a little so that it, with a little Gamsol, so that it keeps these edges a little softer than that. And some of these are a little lighter. I'm gonna add a little bit of CAD, or sorry, titanium white to that. And then add some of these that are a little bit further in the distance. Sorry if I go quiet, it's just because I have a moment of concentration here. Adding a little more ultramarine blue to that. It was getting a little too wishy-washy white there. I'm just sort of creating an effect now with the brush and just letting it wander around a little bit to create that, those trees. I don't like how heavy that looks right there, so I'm just gonna scrub that out a bit. I'm kind of going to go over some of these just to soften those edges a little bit. Try not to overthink when I'm putting these branches in. If you do, they tend to look just a little too contrived. You gotta keep it loose when you're out here. Just putting in a little bit of those warm colors that I originally had, just to soften some of these lines in here. The sun, as it hits between these trees, is really picking up on some of the warm branches that are in there, and I really like that effect. So, and it's a great way to take the lines out of the trees. I'll probably come back into these and add a little bit of sky holes later. I want that edge here to be a little bit darker. I'm muting it down with the burnt sienna so it doesn't look too blue. Bit of warm color again, just to put along these edges here of that. There's a few chunks of ice there also. They're catching the light along the edge of that little bit of water that's running. And some nice hard lines where that little bit of water meets that bit of ice on the edge there. Standing back a lot just to make sure that I'm happy with how this is coming along and with the values. Let's get a little bit. I definitely see some nice bright grasses standing up in there. See if I can get them fine enough with this brush. I actually made it a little wetter, so it seems to help to there's some warm bits definitely showing through on that other bank across the way there. definitely starting to feel a little chilled now, which tells me it's just about time to wrap things up here. I feel like I've caught the general feel that I was looking for today. And I might go back now and add a little bit of detail in the studio. I'll go a little bit lighter here on some of these. But I'll just pick away now at a few of the details here that I'm seeing. And then I think we'll call it for this one. I really feel like I need to do a little bit more with this sort of shoreline between the ice and the snow there into my color that I just started using over this last couple of years is this ultramarine violet, and I really like it for a color. You can warm it up with a little bit of burnt sienna and it neutralizes it quite nicely, and it comes out to be a nice gray. Just picking up on some of the nuances that I'm seeing in that snow, by adding some warmth and some cool areas in there. Very dark shadows in that side where the little creek is running. Not really a creek, but where that little piece of river is actually still running through underneath the ice. I try to keep in mind what drew me to the scene to begin with when I'm painting it, because it's easy to kind of get a little lost in it sometimes, and sometimes you just forget what initially pulled you to the scene that made it interesting to you, and that's also what's gonna make it interesting to the viewer when they look at it. So yeah, it's coming along here. I want to put just a little bit of a edge here on I'm using a little bit of a cooler color there, just as it meets the, and it's kind of on the other side of where that sun's not reaching it. So it's a little cooler. Trying to get some interesting brush marks, so changing the brush here and there just to, again, the same here, there's some cooler bits where the sun's not hitting that ice. So I think I'm going to call that a wrap today. Like I say, we can take that back to the studio and do a little bit more with detail, but I think I'm going to call it out here today. Just if I'm never done, always just that one more brush stroke, or just want to give it a sense of going back in the picture by adding some of these. Filling in that left side of the canvas a bit. I got a little neglected there. So I'll probably do just a couple minutes when I get back to the studio there, just to probably add some little sky holes and maybe do a little more defining with the branches and trees. We'll see how I feel when I get that home. But thanks for watching, and please remember to subscribe if you haven't, and please leave me some comments if you can. I always enjoy seeing those, and yeah, I'll see you on the next plein air adventure. Well, that was a beautiful day plein airing. Now it's time for just a good hot cup of coffee.